Okay. So as they say that what gets measured gets done. So by building better metrics, One Earth balance sheet can inform better decision making at all levels. And I would like to give you an example how this can happen. So we compiled a food balance sheet for a village in Kiori, just to pilot the concept, group of 20 villages. And when we did that, what we found out was that, for example, their yearly consumption of apple was 137 kgs. Okay. And just by planting 7 plants, 7 apple trees, they can be self-sufficient in their apple consumption. So they had 6 acres of total land. And when we did the whole accounting, we found out that just by planting 2 acres of land, they can be self-sufficient in 90% of their food consumption. So if we go back to the Mongolia's example, if the government takes decision and if individuals take decision based on the balance sheet concept and full accounting, they would find out that if their daily requirement is, for example, 1,000 liters of milk in a year, they can fulfill it by certain number of cows which they already have in their region, and they would then go on to expand that capacity rather than importing it from outside. Right. And this can also happen at the grassroots, at the village level also for decision making, where by taking a balance sheet perspective, they can know that what we need to plant so that we can be self-sufficient. Okay. And one of the most important things that this does is that it empirically shifts the goal. It shifts the goal of the whole economic system from growth to balance, because ultimately that is for what the economics exist as a field of science and study. That is to make sure that the needs of everybody is met within so that the limited resources can be distributed in a manner that can lead to the well-being of all. So our needs can be balanced with the resources that we have. Okay. And why this is so fundamental is that growth can happen only to a certain extent. Even when physically, when we grow only when during our teenage years, right? After that, our body stabilizes as well. In nature, also, there is no infinite growth. What is there is balance. And as a chartered accountant, that is the most important lesson that I also learned is of balance. So our whole mindset that has been now built for growth is actually is it creates a disconnect, as I mentioned earlier, from nature. It creates an illusion of separation from nature, because growth cannot exist infinitely in nature. Um, so the power of One Earth balance sheet is that Donna Meadows, who is a systems thinker, she had identified 12 leverage points that needs to take place to cause change in any system. So what One Earth balance sheet does is that it intervenes in almost all these 12 points. It transcends the paradigms. It changes the goal of the system. It changes the rules of the system. It defines the structure of information flows. It defines the structure of material stocks and flows, and so on. Right. But by now, you all might be wondering that is it really possible to compile such a balance sheet at such a large scale, at One Earth scale? So the good news is that yes, it is there, because there is today no shortage of technology and also progress in accounting that can make it happen. It's just that we have not given it a proper framework, and we have not put our efforts towards it. But it and it may seem a very challenging task, but we can start small. As Confucius said that we can start by carrying away small stones to move a mountain. So we can start it by compiling it in parts that we are already doing. We can start by, for example, compiling food balance sheets, energy balance sheets, water balance sheets separately, and then integrate them together into a consolidated one Earth balance sheet. And we need to do it bottom up so that there is no darkroom policy paralysis at the grassroots level. So today, the majority of the data dashboards that exists in the world are either at the national level, aggregated at the national level, or aggregated at the global level. So what this does is, if a policymaker is sitting in Delhi and wants to take a decision, say about a village in Gujarat, they don't have a holistic data dashboard of that village. Neither the community in the villages themselves don't have access to their own data dashboards. So that is why we need to compile it bottom up and integrate into a holistic One Earth balance sheet. So as I said that we are already in the process of doing this, and we have started with the compilation of One Earth food balance sheet first. And we have developed the technology now to do this. So there's an app which a household can use to enter data. It's a survey app, and then it culminates into a holistic village level data dashboard. And when we integrate those village level data dashboards, it culminates into a bioregional data dashboard. And when we integrate the bioregional data dashboards, it culminates into a global data dashboard. So since past 2 years, I've been working on this technology, and this year we have been able to pilot this in the villages in Malaysia and in Bhutan. And but what this really needs when we are collecting data is a strong multilateral support and cooperation. So last year's focus of the G20 on One Earth, One Family, One Future has given us a big hope that we can really do this. And it is an opportunity for India to realize this vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam for the world. So, to just quickly sum up, we live in a complex web of interconnected and interdependent systems. Climate change is not a threat, but rather an opportunity to evolve. Our biggest leverage is our own life. Together, we need to design for a new way of living, starting with our socioeconomic system. One Earth balance sheet is important for the progression of economics. Compile it may seem like a challenging task, but we can start bottom up. And India can lead this initiative at the global scale. So if you have any questions now from here, we can have a good discussion.
So, any initial impressions, concerns, agreements, disagreements? To say now. Just a second, Sneha, can you hear her? Can you hear the question?
Yeah,
Or you can continue.
not very clear.
Sorry, COVID times. Oh, hi, Sneha.
No.
Hi. My question was now that a lot of companies are going compliant to ESG, and government is also promoting the same. Is this related to the amount of carbon dioxide released by each organization, pollution created XYZ?
A part of it, yes. So for example, when we look at this from a balance sheet perspective, carbon emissions, okay, so Earth's ecosystem can absorb only a certain amount of carbon, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes an asset on the balance sheet, right? And our liability is that for our needs, okay, for the goods and services that
Hmm.
we need to emit, we would be emitting certain amount of carbon into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
right? So the asset and the liability has to balance, right? So our need to emit carbon has to be within the limit that has been defined by the Earth's ecosystem, right? And that has to happen at a global scale,
Yeah.
right? So right now, with ESG, what is happening is that it is happening at an individual scale, but there is no integration of it at the global level,
True.
right? Because we would need to cut down on many goods and services which are non-essential to be able to fall within the limit. And for that, we need the audit of economy, but that's not happening at present,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, we are forcing for cut down on fossil fuels, right? There's a huge movement to cut down on fossil fuels.
Correct.
Now, there are many nations that depend on fossil fuel for their livelihoods, right? Like, for example, nations in Middle East,
Yeah.
right? So we are forcing them to cut down on fossil fuels, but there is no cooperation on how their livelihoods or the livelihoods of their people would be met,
Correct. Okay.
right? When they do not have assurance
Hmm.
that their needs would be met, their livelihoods would be met, they would never cut down on fossil fuels, right?
Right.
And to arrive at that assurance, the global leaders need a holistic data dashboard that can assure everybody that we have enough for everybody,
Right.
right?
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Do you think this is realistic? Do you think if start thinking already if you were to create such a balance sheet like she's saying from the bottoms up, can you do that for Ladakh? Can you start creating a list, say under food for Ladakh? Is it possible? How
If
would you begin?
if if
Yes,
you
Neha, go
guys
on.
don't want to do it, it could be a good exercise to in fact create a balance sheet for HIAL as an organization, you know, food balance sheet for HIAL that what items of food is prepared for lunch and is consumed within the organization and how much of what item would need to be produced at the HIAL's campus for it to become self-sufficient. So this can happen not only at a regional level, but even at an organizational level or at a society's level, even for apartments, people can make their own food, energy, and water balance sheets.
Sneha, can you talk about some challenges on, I would say, level zero? Say, when you're collecting data, there is always that subjectivity, right? How do I assign financial words to an acre of land or even, I don't know, 10 kgs of apple? It would mean something else to me, something entirely different to me than, say, another person. I might assign uh, value to an acre of land in the sense that I can build my own home there, while somebody else can say they can build a hotel there. So the financial worth from both these scenarios would be very different, right? So how do you tackle that subjectivity on the very first level to do this?
So actually, what it does is that it brings objectivity into subjectivity. So what do I mean by that? Is that so for example, when we did this in a village in Kiori, okay. Uh, so what the balance sheet does is that this concept of one and balance sheet does is that it shifts the focus away from giving financial numbers to accounting. It is about actual accounting of the resources. So when we are making this sort of balance sheet, it is about actually accounting for land in its own unit, acres or square kilometers, accounting for apples in its own unit rather than in financial numbers. Okay. So that is again a need for economics as a science to progress from to rather giving all the resources a financial number which brings subjectivity and disambiguity to give it actual units because it is about management of resources. If we do not give actual units to resources, then we will not be able to manage it, right? So for any management to happen, we need management information system, right? Even in the corporate, for high level managers, there's always management information systems, which gives them statistics and data on the basis of which they can manage resources, right? But to manage the resources of our planet, there is no, as such, today this management information system that can give this data and analytics. So that is why that then leads to subjectivity. So, for example, when you know that only sustainably within the planetary boundaries. We can allocate only, for example, 1 lakh acres of land, okay, between 1 lakh people. For example, the population is just 1 lakh. So you would know that your fair share is just 1 acre of land, right? When you take more than that, that means you are taking either at the cost of some other people, either at the cost of the environment, or to the cost of the future generation.
Thank you, Sneha. So we were discussing how. Do you want to introduce it?
No, you can. Yeah. Yeah, hi, Sneha. So I listened to your presentation, and Sneha was a student with us, one of the tourism courses, and she started a venture here called Omniverse, which was incubated here as well. A lot of the initial programs we did it here, and this was a very interesting project that she has been working on last few years. So I was thinking, if you can, we can do a workshop now over the next 1 hour. You can introduce to them how they can create a balance sheet of HIAL itself. Hmm? So HIAL's vision is to be self-sufficient. So in terms of energy, we don't take from the grid. We are off grid. So people who are in the energy elective, you can calculate all the buildings that are going to come, the number of people, what is it that we would require, and how one can be self sufficient. Okay, then we want even food self sufficiency. So, people who are in the agriculture and ecology, you can calculate in terms of the area of greenhouses and how much of tonnage of food that we would need, when we grow. So the capacity of this campus is going to be 1,000 people, let's say, when it is a complete university. So you can work for self-sufficiency of 1,000 people. Similarly, eco-responsive architecture you can think of from the building point of view. How much square feet and how many buildings, how much we have to build. And similarly, from in tourism point of view, you can work out the footprint, like a water and carbon footprint, and that kind of self-sufficiency. These are my initial ideas, but Sneha, you can guide on how they can work out the balance sheet of HIAL. So you can go to as much detail, huh? जैसे architecture students can see ये बनाने के लिए भी जो मिट्टी चाहिए, do we have it or not? Do we, or we get it from Basco or somewhere? So you can have many layers of self-sufficiency. So can you set out? You can do a briefing of this because you've done for the earth. So you can maybe for HIAL you can tell. We have 4 electives here. Students from 4 electives: energy, tourism, architecture, and ecology. So from these 4 angles, roti, kapda, makan, basically these 3 are. So main staple self-sufficiency is that, you know. So ancient India was self-sufficient in its staple needs up to 80%. There was local sufficiency. So only 20% जो luxury goods ये थे वो silk route से आते थे वगैरह. People who could afford. So everybody felt rich, like Ladakh was, as Helena Norberg said. Na? Everybody can stitch their own clothes, can make their own houses, can grow their own food. So nobody was poor per se. When you ask 80% of your needs, you can grow locally. Na? So can you suggest how they can go about it? And then maybe another day next week, you can present to her. So you know HIAL and you
Yes.
know our philosophy of self-sufficiency. So From your experience of One Earth balance sheet, if we have to create a balance sheet of HIAL, you can do a briefing to them that how these four electives they can go about it.
Yes. Um, so the first thing that needs to be done is to do the working of the liability side. That what are the needs, okay, as the organization will grow to its full potential. So how much would be the uh, requirement of the food, for example, okay, and food also in detail, like you can, start by, for example, taking the stock of
One
the
sec,
food that
Sneha.
has been.
Sneha, just one sec. We'll get you on the screen. One sec.
Okay.
So she's saying first you have to do, so balance sheet में demand supply होता है, asset liability. So the demand side is how much we will need. So right now you can work for let's say 1,000 people in habitation. Then you can later on refine it more and more. You can do next 10 years ka growth. That is more refining. But if you take 1,000, then it is finally how much we need. So demand side. Yeah, you are on the screen. You can continue.
Yes. So, for example, if you're doing food balance sheet, how you can go about is that you can take stock of what has been purchased last year at HIAL, okay, all the items in how much quantity and how many people were there, right? Once you have that data point, then you can populate that now, for example, if for 10 people there was a consumption of 100 kgs of apple, so if it would be now 1,000 people, so you can just multiply, right? So that is your estimation of the demand side. And then you can compare that what HIAL is at present producing, which is the asset. Okay. So for example, if HIAL at present has allocated, say, 0.5 acre of land for apple production, and if you find out that to produce 1,000 kgs of apple, we need to plant, say, 100 trees, and 100 trees would need 20 acres of land, or sorry, 2 acres of land. So you know then that there is a deficit of 1.5 acres of land, right? That Hayat needs to plant 1.5 acres of land more to be self-sufficient in food consumption, in its apple consumption.
So she's saying that you take last year's data and you pro rata basis project it to the future. So whoever is in agriculture, no? Three of you, right? No? Who all are in ecology?
Show of hands.
Ecology, agriculture. So you both also, no? No? What are you elected? Acha, yours is after you. Okay. I thought there were four the other day. Okay. But anybody else who's interested in this aspect? Yeah, sure. So four of you, you can work on the food sufficiency at Hayat. So you may have to interact with a lot of Hayat staff also, like last year consumption, how many people, and so on, and project it to the future. Then you will have to go and map all the orchards. We have an apple orchard, we have greenhouses. The plantation team can help you how much produce was there. Then you find out how much was the gap. And to fill that gap, what more needs to be done? How many more orchards need to be planted? How many more greenhouses need to be made, and so on. She'll come to that. We'll come to that. Yeah, so you can continue, Sneha.
Yeah, and then similarly, you can do it for energy also. Okay. That how many kilowatts of energy HIAL as a campus, when it's fully built, would be needed. Okay. And at present, what is the installed capacity? So whatever at present is the installed capacity becomes the asset. Okay. And what is needed becomes the liability. Okay. then which needs to be balanced. So if there's a gap, then it needs to be fulfilled. If there is a surplus, that means that HIAL can, give that surplus outside and integrate it within the with the village. Okay, when we do the village level balance sheet for FYANG, so HIAL would integrate in the village, right? So that is how you can do for the energy. Similarly, you can do for the water, right? That how much water consumption would be needed for HIAL, and at present, what is the capacity? If we are taking the water from groundwater, so what is the capacity? If we are planning for ice stupas, then what is the capacity, right? And how many, say for example, ice stupas would need to be made to fulfill HIAL's water requirements, right? So for tourism, for those who you are in tourism, so it is little complex, but how it would need to be done is in the manner that Ladakh as a bioregion can sustain how many tourists? That is one data point that needs to be found out, right? Because that is on the asset side, that's the limit. And at present, how many tourists are coming, right? So that data point, which would come for, how many tourists Ladakh as a bioregion can sustain, would depend on Ladakh's food, water, energy, and all those balance sheets. But Ladakh is a whole bioregion's balance sheet, right? So that is a number that needs to be worked out. But it's going to be a little extensive and complex, but
Is there a specific format that is required when it comes to One Earth balance sheet?
Could you get that, Sneha?
yes, so it's basically two sides, okay? It's asset side and liability side. Liability side is the need side, estimation of the needs and the requirements. So for example, when you're making food balance sheet, on your liability side would be on an Excel sheet if you're making. So on your liability side, it would be the list of the items that is required for consumption and HIAL and the number of kgs, okay, that is required of that item. And on the asset side would be that how much is the produce of those items. And then when you do the subtraction, you would know that whether there is a surplus or a deficit.
We have some more questions.
Hello. What could be on the liability side in tourism sector? Like item,
So tourism,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So liability side on the tourism sector would actually be the need for people to come to Ladakh. So how many tourists, say for example, from the world wants to come to Ladakh? That is the liability actually.
Sorry.
Okay. How many people from the world want to come to Ladakh
Hmm.
is the liability a year. Okay.
That's the only.
Now,
Okay.
yeah, now given Ladakh's bioregion and its ecological and social limits, okay, we may not be able to accommodate all those people, right? So we will have to cap that liability at a certain number. And that number we can arrive at only when we do the calculation at Ladakh's whole level, that how much water is there, how much food is there, um, how much carbon footprint the region can take and all that calculations.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
The installed capacity for energy is a liability, right?
No, it's an asset, no?
Okay, okay.
Because that is what is available at present, right? And then there would be a need. So what we need is a liability. Asset can ki asset, what is asset? What is given is asset. Okay, what we need is a liability from that asset.
Were we going to get the data that how many people want to come to the
So could you get that question, Sneha? So the question is, how would you where would you get this estimate of how many people want to visit Ladakh? Where is this data available? Or how can we get that data?
Yeah, so good proxy of that data point would be the number of tourists who are coming at present, because at present Ladakh has no cap, right? So the proxy of that would be the number of people who are coming to Ladakh in a year.
Yeah, that will be the number of tourists that have come to Ladakh. But how do we know how many of them are willing to come to Ladakh?
Yeah,
Yes.
so valid question. Wouldn't it be the same as the footfall?
Yes, that is what I'm saying, that the proxy of that number, because we do not have the data point right now, okay? Ideally, what we are aspiring towards is that in future, everybody individually, they have a survey app where they, punch in their needs of resources and travel and services for that year, and that populates into a global level balance sheet. But that's a very long way to go. Right now, for this data point that you are asking, a good proxy could be the number of tourists who are coming to Ladakh in a year. Because Ladakh right now is not restricting any tourists, right? So whoever wants to come is coming, right? So that is the liability. So if right now every year on an average 3 lakh people are coming to Ladakh, so there is a liability for Ladakh's bioregion to serve the needs of those 3 lakh people, right? To accommodate those 3 lakh people. So that's a liability.
Be more specific. Yeah, that was a translation. Sneha, can you guide the architecture fellows a bit? What would be a potential balance sheet there?
Okay. So again, for architecture, it would be in, in a manner, it particularly relates to land use. Okay. For architecture, what is relevant is land use. That, for example, in Ladakh's ecology and bioregion, how much land can be sustainably allocated for building purposes? Number one, right? That would be your asset. So, for example, if Ladakh has, anybody knows how many total square kilometer area Ladakh has?
Six plus 10,000. So the estimate
So
is
whatever,
65,000 square meters.
so whatever that number is, okay, 65,000 square kilometer, for example. Now, to to be within the ecological boundary, say for example, the global, recommendation is that at least 70 to 80% land should be, kept natural and untouched, right? That is how it is in Bhutan also, that 70% of it should always be forest untouched areas, okay? So that means that only 20 to 30% of land can be used for human purposes, which includes agriculture also. Okay, so when you minus the land required for agriculture from there, you would arrive at land that can be used for building purposes, right? So that is your asset figure then. That okay, out of 65,000 square kilometer, maybe I can use just 5,000 square kilometer of land for building purposes. Now, within that 5,000 square kilometers of land, we have to ensure that everybody's housing needs are met, right? And other public infrastructure needs, right? So now, how would you design a house, right? Or how much square kilometer you would allocate for one house, right? This is related to land use, okay, for architecture, which is relevant. Number two, what is relevant is material that we are using for construction, right? So, for example, if we are using iron for construction, okay, so iron rods for construction. Now, what we will look at is that how much iron is available as a natural resource, okay? in Ladakh or in the world, because Ladakh may not have iron deposits. Okay. Out of that, how much can be sustainably harvested from that mine in a year? Okay, so that we don't deplete it completely. So, for example, if it comes to say 1 crore tons, sorry, yeah, 1 crore tons, for example, then we would need to know that how much is the building requirement and how much each building can utilize, right? If that material is being overused, that means you need to find a substitute of that, right? And we would need to be remain in within that limit. So material calculation is the thing, even for mud building, okay? If we are using mud. So right now, if we are sourcing clay from Basgo, say for example, and that is the only clay deposit in Ladakh, right? So we would need a good estimation of that how many kgs of clay is available there, how frequently it gets renewed, how much can be harvested from that mountain in a year, right? So that we don't completely deplete it, right? So for architecture, that is why many calculations for each of the materials that you're using for construction, there would be, need of calculation there, right? But you can do on a land use basis if you for this workshop. Say for example, HIALs, you can do a balance sheet for HIALs land use.
So shall we sit in our groups? So here, ecology, energy, tourism, architecture. If you can also check. One more question, Sneha.
Uh, Ma'am, like in what do we now in accounting is we don't have a measure to account the qualitative measure like loyalty, like honesty. Do we have a scope for these qualitative measure in one art balance sheet?
One balance sheet is purely for economic accounting purposes. So it is purely for natural growth, but emotional.
They have to consider monetary value of. I mean, there is the biggest disadvantage of current accounting, so that came into my mind. Thank
Yes,
you.
but that's not,
Okay.
that's not so much related to accounting as such, not related to economics as a okay, but that is related to how we measure our progress.
Okay.
So, for example, Bhutan has BNH. Okay, they measure progress on gross national happiness instead of GDP. Okay, so gross national happiness takes into factor all these qualitative measures as you mentioned. Okay, but on a balance sheet is purely a resource allocation on how to manage this, the natural resources of our.
Thank you, ma'am.
So Sneha, they've started working in their groups. So you can
All
log off
right,
if you want to, and I'll quickly bug you if there's a question. Does that sound okay?
sure.
Thank you, Sneha.